Welcome to Pass It On, Connecting Soul to Soul, a podcast introducing you to courageous souls. These people are taking their spark in life and passing it on, lighting their corner of the world. I'm your host, Tammy Stuhr, best-selling author, speaker, and CEO of Author My Day, a company inspiring courage. I interview people about how they exercise their courage muscle and use their story to inspire you to live with a courageous heart. Let's get started with today's guest. Francine Apy is an author, mindset coach, mom, and the founder of SoulFilling, a platform sparking balanced, mindset-rooted adoption conversations that help people carry less and live more. With 25 years in HR leadership and a lifelong connection to adoption through her 3 sons and 5 nieces and nephews, Francine knows the power of honest storytelling and resilient mindset tools. She brings a grounded, uplifting voice to the adoption space, creating space for families to feel seen, supported, and strong. Her debut children's book, Brianna's Brave Day at School, her newest children's book, Dream Dream, What Will You Dream, and her newly released Adoption Mindset Journal are all available on Amazon, and they offer families and individuals thoughtful tools to reflect, grow, and spark everyday conversations around adoption. Francine's mission is to make adoption part of the mainstream conversation through curiosity, compassion, and storytelling. Whether speaking, writing, or connecting on podcasts, she invites listeners to pause, reflect, and embrace their story just as it is and just as it's unfolding. Francine, welcome. I can't wait to hear your story.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that very warm welcome, for sure.
You are such a spark that I've only been around once. We met at a conference, and your smile, your enthusiasm, and then I find out that adoption is basically your mission, or the open conversations of adoption. Telling a child they're adopted. Wow. Talk about a courageous conversation. Why do so many families avoid or have such a hard time or fear that conversation?
You know, I have to reflect on giving a little bit of the snapshot of the history of adoption, right? So my hope today in 2025, as families are brought together through adoption, my hope and prayer is that those children know pretty much from the minute that those families are brought together that adoption is in their story. But as history tells us with adoption, a lot of its foundation is on secrecy, on not sharing the full story. And quite honestly, my thoughts around that is just fear, individuals' own insecurity. I like to believe that it was never like this intentional, malicious topic that evolved, but that's really just how it was portrayed, 60 plus years ago that, a woman has a baby and that she chooses to place the baby for adoption and there's a match and we just don't need to talk about it anymore. And as we know in current life in the recent years, 25 years, or more, recently that quite honestly, you just have that conversation, in my opinion, from the minute that baby is placed in your arms. With our children, we were very fortunate. Their birth mothers allowed me in the delivery room with them. I cut the cord for my children. And at the end of the day, I began the early days of using the word adoption, finding as many books as I could find with the word adoption in it, and incorporating that in our regular family language. So I think for people that didn't have that experience, recently or definitely many, many years ago, those conversations are harder to have, right? That once you've already established your relationship with your family, with your children, and now they're teenagers and potentially first learning, those conversations, of course, have to be so much more difficult than a child raised within the family of adoption in their story right from the get-go. So I pray and I hope, those stories are fewer and far between, but that's what a lot of people, I think, think of when they hear about adoption. They think about those stories that the people, the children, the young adults, the adults didn't know till way later in life. And of course, those conversations are much more difficult.
Right. Jamie Kern Lima was just on Shark Tank as a guest shark the other night, and she was talking about how she didn't find out till she was 29 years old that she was
Yeah,
adopted. And my friend, my really good friend, she found her birth certificate as a teenager.
yeah,
And it is just like, I just keep thinking, how do we help everybody have those conversations? Because it is a lot of courage. It does take a lot of courage to have those. So, what's some advice that you have for the families?
I think for children that and young adults that find out later in life, you know, I just truly feel that we all have a choice to live our lives either in a place of regret, frustration, disappointment, or allow ourselves those feelings, right? Because that is very frustrating. I mean, to be a young adult or a teenager and just learning this, I would imagine those individuals then are questioning everything about what they were told throughout their childhood because the people that they trust the most ideally are your parents or the people that raise you. So everything becomes in question, right?
Mhm.
But I guess it really comes back to the foundation of once the sooner you share, the better. So if you didn't share soon enough, today is a good day to do that, right? And begin the healing. Because for me, the longer we wait for the perfect day, or once this situation gets resolved, or once they're 18, they'll better understand. And all the stories I think sometimes we tell ourselves, whether you have adoption in your story or not, just prolongs the inevitable that quite honestly, that child, that person has it's their obligation, it's their right to know as much about their story as possible. And even if you don't have all the details or some of the details are difficult, having that initial conversation, quite honestly, it's just such a huge relief for everyone involved because as the family, the adoptive family, carrying that around and not sharing that is not an easy carry either. And I think just acknowledging, apologizing, and recognizing that going forward, that you just want to do right by it, that conversation just needs to happen sooner rather than later.
What are some of the fears that you find that parents have going into these conversations?
I think I think there's a fear of, potentially what if the child doesn't love me as
Mhm.
much as they love their birth family, What if I don't say it the right way and they resent the way that I say it? The fear of not saying it right or getting exactly what parts of the story to share first and how and when. Not doing it perfect, the fear of not doing it perfect because there's this instantaneous love that you have for a child, right? In my opinion, whether you give birth to the child or the child is placed in your hands through adoption, and you just want to protect them so much, right? You want to
Right.
protect them, and and in your mind, you think you're doing things to protect them. But in reality, if you're holding back key information about their story, if you're holding back things that are hard for you to say because it's hard for the adult to say, the parent to say at the expense of the child, who are we really protecting there? So I
Mhm.
think it just becomes, needing to really get honest with yourself and work through maybe talking to somebody, right? A therapist, somebody who has gone through it, build community.
So we've talked quite a bit about kind of what you're doing, and so this might be a little bit of a redundant question, but still a
Mhm.
question of every guest. What spark do you want to be in the world, Francine?
Sure. When I look back on why I started SoulFilling a couple years ago, I had a great career in HR development and leadership, and I just am fascinated with people with resilience of what makes people tick and want to show up and fulfill, their life's missions, if you will, or passions. And, when I sat with what I wanted to do in this latter half of my life, it's really centered, it became evident that it needed to be something around adoption. And when I sat with adoption, I really felt that as a society in 2025, we could do a better job at depicting what life is like through the lens of adoption 2025 as to 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And I think we haven't done a great job in the portrayal of what we see on the news or in books or possibly in movies. A lot of the focus tends to be on the loss or the trauma or the disappointment or the changed minds or the secrets that were kept and those sorts of things. And so for me, if there's a way that I can begin to bring to light that there are more people out there, for lack of a better phrase, kind of doing right by telling
Mhm.
the whole adoption story, as I like to say, a whole balanced story,
Mhm.
then I will be fulfilling my spark in getting that communication out there. Because I really feel like, life is imperfect, right? Nobody
Mhm.
has a perfect story. Nobody has a life. If we interviewed everyone, that lived to be 85, did you love every chapter of your story? Did you love every incident, every moment of your story? And not to say they're going to reflect and say, I don't like the fact that I was adopted, but maybe they'll look back on that and be like, that was a difficult time for me to really understand that as a young person, 16 to 18, trying to figure out, or even 14 to 16, trying to figure out why this choice was made on my behalf. That was a difficult time for me, but I worked through that and you showed resilience and, you built your team. Maybe you engaged with an adoption coach or an adoption competent therapist and you began to understand why people choose to place their children for adoption, right? We don't say give up our children anymore. They made an adoption plan, right? They chose
Okay.
not to parent, you're right? There are people that get pregnant and have children that choose not to parent for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Could be emotional, it could be financial, it could be a multitude of reasons of why people choose not to parent. And so when we look at it through that lens that nobody has this perfect story and nobody loves every aspect of their story, and you allow yourself the grace to build your team and to bring in the resources you need when you kind of get stuck, that's the other piece I want to bring forward to people because it's not just people that have adoption in their story that struggle with difficulty or trauma or loss or what have you. There's a lot of different avenues and stories. And I'm not undermining that they're all the same and you have to experience all the same things, but with the right mindset and with the right resilience, we can get through whatever we put our minds to.
Just in those few paragraphs that you just said, like I have learned already so much. They made an adoption plan. The parent chose not to parent. I love how it's that parent's journey isn't the child's journey. The
That's
child has
right.
their own life, their own identity, and you're brilliant. I hope
Oh, I
you
don't know about that. I don't know about that. But I've been reading is a lot and I live it, right?
right.
So, and this is what I want to become, Tammy, not kind of, to become mainstream, right? Casual mainstream conversations. Language, as you know, as an author and passionate about writing, language is huge, right?
Mhm.
So being able to get on a platform, either through writing my children's book or being a motivational speaker or a public speaker or putting together this course that I'm working on, whatever it is to help bring that language to the forefront of what the language is today is my biggest hope and mission because it isn't common knowledge and the only way it will get that way is for us to talk about it more.
Right. Tell us about a project that you worked on in the past that you had to exercise your courage muscle.
My courage muscle. I think starting soul filling, to be honest with you. I had 25 years of HR experience. HR, quite honestly, came really naturally to me. I was an English communications major. I wasn't an industrial relations major, and now they call it human resources management and leadership. Um, but I really felt very comfortable in that space. The last 10 years of my life, or career, my life is not, the last 10 years are not over. The last 10 years of my career, I was a part owner in a family technology business as well as overseeing HR. And I learned a ton around, operating from a business leader standpoint, business owner standpoint. But I never had my own company, right, by myself.
Mhm.
So it took courage when I decided, it was a dear friend of mine who I wished her a happy birthday. She just coincidentally happens to be adopted. And I said, happy birthday. She said, thank you, my soul-filling friend, Fran. And that's where it all began because my dear friend Deirdre called me her soul-filling friend, Fran. So I'm like, soul-filling, that's a beautiful word. And I really sat with it for a little while. And I'm like, what fills my soul? Like, what do I get excited about? What do I think I could bring to the world that could be helpful? And Soul Filling was founded. So I'm like, all right, so what do I have to do? So I Googled how to start a business, right? So I had to get an attorney and, created a logo and had that patented and, all the things. So that did take courage to go out on my own and
Mhm.
kind of work through all those pieces, not really 100% knowing where it would go, which is a little bit out of my comfort zone because I tend to know where things exactly are going to go. But
Mhm.
I don't right now, and I still don't, but I'm still get up every day with the optimism that it's on the right path, it's going somewhere. So that took
Absolutely.
courage.
Wow. So tell us more about Brianna's brave day.
Sure. So Brianna's brave day at school, here she is based on an actual event that actually happened to one of our sons when he was in first grade at school. And I could have used his name, but I have three sons, and so I'm channeling my girl energy, and Brianna would have been one of my girls' names. So we named
Okay.
her Brianna. But basically, the story is actually what happened to him one day at school when the topic of adoption came up. And it came up in a negative way. And I won't give the whole book away, or would you like me to give the whole story away?
No, you don't have to give it away because we want
Yeah,
people to buy that and read it and share it with other people that could
sure.
benefit from it.
Yeah, and I wrote it in such a way that I hope that even if you don't have adoption in your story, that you want to read it to your children. I've had some parents say to me, because at the end of the book, I have an adoption key
Mhm.
of like common language of adoption. And I've had some parents say to me, just was really helpful for me to read that, like birth mother. She's not the real mother, she's the birth mother. Some of this terminology that we often, don't know the new way to say things. So it was helpful to see it that November's National Adoption Month that we, recognize and take extra effort in bringing awareness to adoption and things like that. And also, so that's at the back of the book. But basically, adoption came up in my son's little first grade classroom in a negative way. One of his classmates said adoption, something very negative about adoption. And he's my most shy of the three and still is. He's my middle. And he put his little hand up in the air and he shared his adoption story with the class and shared in such a way to explain to the person who said the comment of as to why her comment was wrong. And that to me, and sometimes I get a little emotional still. Now he's 20 years old, still even thinking about it. Talk about bravery and courage to put your hand up and be able to articulate as a 7 or 8 year old little boy what adoption meant to him was huge for us as a family. So I thought that would be a good place to start on my mission of helping to bring the conversation of adoption at home, work, and school. I thought this is a great tool, right, to bring a book to an elementary classroom. And I had an opportunity 2 weeks ago to read the book in his little classroom in the school where the story took place. So those kids thought it was pretty cool.
What a great, courageous action, which takes me to my next question.
Sure.
How do you define courage?
Courage, I think, is that action that we do. I think of it as an action that we do when we have to do something difficult, but we know it's the right thing to do and we execute, we do it. And maybe not even in a big way, maybe in a small way, but we do something, take action.
I just think about like your son raising his hand. Just the act of raising his hand was the courageous moment
Right?
to
Yeah.
tell the story. So
Yeah.
fascinating.
And to be able for those words to come out of his little mouth, And then I was thrilled to share, which I do touch on in the book. The teacher ended up having didn't do the lesson plan for what was next. And she had a whole conversation on how families come together in different families. And it was just a great opportunity for that teaching life moment. And this was, 15 plus years ago. So.
Wow. So not only is it going to help teachers, it's going to end up or help families, it's going to end up helping teachers, it's help children learn about bravery. Why do you believe courage matters?
I think it matters because it gives people a voice, an authentic voice. Like if we all just yes everything and yes agree with everything, even though inside our bellies or in our hearts is something isn't sitting right, I think we're just doing ourselves this big injustice of not being our authentic self. And, not to say you need to go around all the time boasting about your ideas and how your ideas are the most important ideas. Certainly no. But I think we are doing ourselves an injustice when we don't conjure up the courage to be authentic and just kind of going along with a status quo. Get
Wow.
kind of boring, right? If we didn't have courage,
Right?
it would be kind of boring.
It would.
We
It
all would
would. I
do,
agree.
we all
And
would
it,
kind of be going about it in the same way, and that would be pretty boring.
wow. What's next for Francine?
Well, I would love to see my books in every classroom and bookstore and library. That is a lofty goal of mine to kind of work towards just having adoption themed books like mine just readily available for people and have it be a tool that people just can just learn about adoption, whether you have adoption in your story or not. I'd love to start and finish my master's in applied positive psychology. And I would love to incorporate the science behind what's taught for that master's program and wrap that into an online course that I have in the works, which I could teach in person or I could do online, which is adoption conversation, history, insight, mindset, and the power of understanding all three of those within the adoption lens. And I really am excited and I'm hopeful that with the master's from the University of Pennsylvania, that I'll be able to take that credential and apply it to a course that would then potentially, go out to school guidance counselors or different therapists, whether they're adoption competent therapists or not, just to begin to build a better understanding of why some of the adoption stigmas are there and how we can help when we do get stuck within this adoption space in creative ways with coaching and with this course and certainly with therapy too. So just bringing it, as much into mainstream as
Mhm.
possible in small or in big ways.
Absolutely. What a great master's project thesis, whatever that university or college requires. How fascinating. I would love to be your professor
Yeah.
if you worked on that. That would be so neat. So
Uh,
How
Thank
can
you.
our podcast listeners best connect with you?
Sure. So my website is soulfillingadoption.com. So that's a great place to start. I'm certainly on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and I do have a biweekly newsletter, which you can subscribe to through my website, which is just a great bite-size, messages and stories and communications, things that I'm working on that help to just be in touch with what I have going on.
Well, I have a friend right away that's coming to mind that I'm like, she needs to connect with you. She's also working on her master's, not in positive psychology, but very close to that. I don't remember what her university calls it, but I'm like, she needs this. And she's heavily involved in the adoption story. So
Oh, wonderful.
very,
Wonderful. Well, I am looking for, actually, I neglected to say the second book that I'm working on is highlighting 33, because it's my lucky number, 33 stories at a time where families, people, birth mother, adoptive mom, child, whoever within the adoption space chose to focus on what's going right in their story and to show how when they did get stuck, how they built in resilience to kind of get through. So, and then I want to put all those stories together, and it's the book is called The Places Our Feet Have Taken Us. So that book, so on my website, there is a link, Share My Story, and that gives you the opportunity to just share a little bit about their story. And if it's something that I want to pursue more with, then we would send up an interview and they would be included in my book. So,
oh, now I have two people. Her story
yay.
is fantastic because she met her birth mother. And when I was at her wedding, she sat me at her birth mother's table.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
and I'm just looking at her going, you're the same person. Like they
Yeah.
were identical twins.
Wow.
And it was just kind of that out of body experience or something like that. But I'm like, this is insane.
Yeah.
Her parents, all three families, um, came together and just have rallied in her life. And it's just been such a neat story to watch come together.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, I love to connect. I mean, if they want to just kind of check out a little bit what I'm doing and what I'm looking for, feel free to share my website. But yeah, that share my story is something that I really would love to see come to fruition
So,
sooner rather than later. That's going to take a little bit more time for me to pull all together because I think I have about 8 stories so far, but they're coming together.
Francine, thank you for being a guest on Pass It On, Connecting Soul to Soul. You are one of those people who definitely is passing it on and is changing families and giving parents the confidence, whether they're the one making the adoption plan or the one that is starting a new family. And thank you for all that you do. And thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the opportunity, Tammy.
Let me thank you for listening and being inspired to exercise your own courage muscle. Please leave us a rating on whatever platform you are listening. For even more, you can go to www.authormyday.com. Remember, you only have this one life, this one day, so always author your day. Thanks for listening to Pass It On, Connecting Soul to Soul.